Part of the staff of KTIB in the 1970s and 80s included Jimmie Cole, the longtime programming director of the station. Let's hear about his memories at KTIB, then AM 630, later AM 640. Jimmie Cole, how are you today?
Hey, William, it's good to be with you.
Well, how are things over there in Lafayette?
Actually, things are pretty good. It's pretty nice right now. Been here for about 15 years, give or take. But it seems like yesterday that I was in Thibodaux.
All right, well, let's go back to those memories. Are you originally from this area?
No, actually, I was born in Eunice, and I grew up in that area, and went to LSU for a little while, went to Nichols, and then worked over at KCIL in Homer, and then, gosh, it must have been around 76, 77, right around that area. Went to work for Ray Sadie, of course, at KTIB, and stayed there for about 11 or 12 years.
All righty. Now, so obviously, you come into KTIB to work for Mr. Sadie. What were your impressions when you first met him?
Well, I'd met Ray a couple of times before. I was working at KCIL, left there, and went in to visit Ray. We had a hurricane, and I don't know what the hurricane was. I can't remember that far back. But they had a hurricane coming in. We were a daytime station at the time. So we were going off the air around 5 or 6 o'clock. And I just went to tell him I was interested in going to work for him. I just left KCIL so I could go to school. And he said, well, you you want to help out? We got a hurricane going on. And, of course, they were staying on all night for the hurricane. And I said, look, I don't mind helping you out. So I picked up some mail from him. I drove from Homer to Thibodaux, stayed on the air all night for him while Marie was on. Of course, everybody remembers Marie. She was doing all the news reports, and I really ran the board for her all night long. And then the next day, of course, everybody was working because of the hurricane, and the next day everybody was taking off because they had worked all night, and I continued to work. And I guess from that day on, Ray just kind of took me under his wing, and I went to work for him about a week later. So I did that gratis. I did that free of charge, and he hired me, and I stayed there for over a decade.
Now, when you were here, were you primarily the program director?
Yeah, actually, I started off just as a DJ because I was going to go to school, and gradually took over as a music director, and then as a program director. I was working for Roy Pugh, who was the station manager at the time. Roy was doing the morning show. He was on from 6 to 8, and then, of course, being the sales manager and the general manager and the sales manager and the station manager and everything else, he didn't have a whole lot of time to put into on-air work. So he would do 2 hours in the morning, and then, of course, he was doing the Nichols play-by-play and the coaches shows on KHOM at the time. So I went on at 8, and I stayed on until about, I guess it must have been about noon or 1. I don't remember the exact schedule that we had back then. And then we had somebody in the afternoons that came on and stayed on until we went off the air, which was, during the summer it was 8:15, I believe, and during the winter it was 5 o'clock. So we had really strange hours back then.
I believe back then, I think the official sign-off was at sunset.
Yeah, we went off. Every month it was different. I think the latest week in June it was 8:15, and then in July it was 8, and then 7:45, and then 7:15, and then finally in December it went down to 5 o'clock. So we were just on the air for a few hours a day, actually.
Mm-hmm. Now, all the time you were at KTIB, you mentioned some of those names with Marie and Roy Pugh. It must have been a good working relationship with both of them, along with some of the other folks that came through.
Oh, I'm going to tell you what, that may be the most fun time of my life. Not only the people that we worked with, Roy was just a great person to work for. Marie was a dream. She knew everybody and his brother. And she was just a workaholic. And, everybody that was there was just wonderful. Ray Sadie, he was kind of crotchety, but my goodness, he was a wonderful person. And a good radio man, he really was. But, and I guess he still is if he wanted to be. But he's retired now. But he was a great person to work for also. We just had a good bunch of people. And I think not only that, but I think the fact that it was kind of a small community, and that it's not like today. Today people have so many things going on. And back then, everybody kind of took the radio station as their own. They kind of adopted it, and they just treated you like you were one of theirs. I was doing the swap shop, and do you guys still do the swap shop over there?
No, that unfortunately ended a few years ago.
Well, I did the swap shop for several years, and I just moved to Thibodaux from Houma, and just to show you how the people are there. I was living on Tetro Street over there by E.D. White, and I had two big old pecan trees in my backyard. And of course, we get on the swap shop, and you're waiting for the phones to ring, and when the phones aren't ringing, you just kind of make conversation, and you just talk a little bit and try to stir up some stuff. And I just made the statement, hey, we just moved here, and I got two big old pecan trees in my backyard, but I don't have any pecans, and I don't know what's wrong. If anybody knows, what I can do to make these things bear some fruit, let me know, because I'm just dying for a pecan pie. And, I was doing this because I just was trying to get some conversation going, right? So the phones would ring, and people would say, oh, well, they only bear fruit every other year, and, they went on and on. But the next day I get to work, and I had 4 pecan pies sitting on my desk from 4 different listeners. And you don't see that kind of stuff anywhere else. I mean, it's a real testament to the area, the radio station, and the wonderful people in that area. I miss the heck out of them.
Well, it's pretty incredible. Now, you mentioned, we mentioned Roy and Marie just now, but some other names we want you to get opinions on. Another gentleman who was famous for a swap shop, Les Domain.
Les was a character. I'm telling you, there's no telling what would come out of his mouth. We had a guy one time and called, and Les said, well, you don't sound like you're from around here. And the guy said, well, no, I'm from Alaska. And he said, well, welcome to the United States. And that's the kind of stuff that would come out of his mouth. He was one of a kind. He really was. They don't make them like that for sure.
Do you remember the story? I'm not sure if this happened when he was at KTIB, but are you familiar with the lady who called about the dog available for stud service?
No, I missed that story. What do you mean?
Well, his reply was, well, ma'am, is it a male or a female?
Now, that was Les Domain at his best there.
Now, another gentleman who a lot of people remember, especially on weekends for all of his music variety, Leroy Martin.
Well, let me tell you about Leroy Martin. I met Leroy when I was about 11 years old. I was in Boy Scouts, and my dad took us on a little field trip. And we went to KTIB. It was down at the time. It was down on Canal, and my dad took us there. And Leroy was Leroy must have been about 60 or 70 then, and that had to be 50 years ago. So I think Leroy's running on about 130 years old right now. He's been around since Marconi was.
Wow.
He is a character too, and he always had great music, and he was a fun person to listen to. The great thing about listening to radio back then, people were just themselves. There was no phony stuff going on. We had a concert in town at the Thibodaux Civic Center one Saturday night, and it was a big concert. A couple by the name of Jimmie Brown and Helen Cornelius. And at the time, this had to be in the mid to late 70s. And at the time, Jimmie Brown and Helen Cornelius, they were a very popular group. They had a ton of #1 songs. They were a big country act. And I'm driving down, and they were going to be in the Civic Center that night. It was a Saturday night, and I was living in Houma at the time, and I was driving around. I don't know where I was going, but listening to Leroy, and in the middle of the song, the microphone comes on, and Leroy says, if Jimmy or Roy or anybody is listening to the radio right now, if you can give me a call, because I have Jimmie Brown and Helen Cornelius in the studio right now, and I need to figure out how to turn on this other microphone so that I can interview them.
Wow.
So, those sorts of things, that doesn't happen anymore.
No, not to say the least.
No.
Okay, well, some other names, and I think we had mentioned to this when I called you before, but a gentleman who, behind the scenes, served as a pretty good engineer, Ricky Benson.
Ricky was instrumental in us switching from 6:30 to 6:40 so that we could stay on 24 hours. And he was a young guy. He worked for us at KTIB and KHOM, and he was just a real good technically. He was a real good guy, and he came from a radio background. his father-in-law was a guy by the name of M.C. Perry, who did news, sports, weather, and in Houma for KJIN, I think, and KCIL for many years. Well, really a respected radio person back in the 60s and 70s, who's no longer with us now. But Ricky came from that kind of background, so he was a good guy, and he came from a pretty good radio family too.
Let's talk about a gentleman that kind of brought a chuckle to you when I mentioned to him earlier. I believe he worked weekends at the time, and now he's more successful than all of us combined. Brian Landrum.
I don't know how long Brian stayed with us, William. I know he knocked on my door, and like most of us in the radio business, you know, when you get in at a real young age, you just kind of hang around. You know, you pretend that you're a disc jockey as a kid, and as you grow up, you just start hanging around the radio station until you finally get a job. And Brian was one of those kids. He was just a little snot-nosed, smelly kid hanging around the radio station. I finally paid him a couple of bucks a day to empty garbage cans for us. And he kind of grew up around that and became a DJ, a weekend DJ, a real nice fella. He's got to be in his 30s now, I guess, 30s or 40s. But as I understand, he's doing real well in Nashville at WSM. Of course, the home of the Grand Ole Opry, so he's doing pretty well right now.
Now, he told a story about you. We want to see if you could.
He's lying to you.
You remembered that one morning he said that he was asked to read a copy that Maria handed to him for Saturday morning news, and you were doing a remote, I believe, at a supermarket, and he believes you were listening at the time, and he was about halfway reading the copy when he realized he was reading the wrong side of the page. And he forgot to turn off his mic before he went to break, and an expletive got out over the air that when he realized the mic was still on. And because he was saying, bleep, this is the wrong copy. Well, and then later that morning he drove over to where you were at the remote, but you didn't bring up whether or not you didn't bring up the expletive, and so he thought that you didn't hear it. So, and later in the weekend you met him again, and then you said what the expletive was, and then he realized all along that you knew about it. You just didn't want to say nothing at first.
Yeah, we were broadcasting out. I think at the time it was called Audubon Supermarket. It's now one of the Rouse's supermarkets. But yeah, I remember that well. Now I will tell you this: that wouldn't be the first or the last time that something got out over the air that wasn't supposed to. Trust me. I had a guy that I can't remember what his name was, but we didn't get the greatest talent at the time. We were kind of a small market, and we were one of those radio stations where people kind of, they kind of paid their dues with us, and then they moved on. And I had a guy who was from Houston, and I think he's going on to be a pretty big announcer now. But he was reading a story about a gun that discharged in the French Quarter. They were on the bottom floor in a building. The gun went off. It went through the roof, the ceiling, and the way the story read was, the bullet entered the back of this woman's neck or something. It was a pretty brutal thing, and it exited from her forehead, and that's the way it was supposed to read. And he read that the bullet entered the back of her neck and excited her forehead instead of exited from the forehead. And I'm telling you, the poor guy did not recover from that. He had to turn off his microphone for the rest of the day. He just felt terrible. It was an awful thing for him. But we had plenty of those things happen.
Mm-hmm. Now, another gentleman who I had forgotten about it first, but I believe he announced there for quite a long time, Richard Luquette.
Yeah, Rick was around for a real long time. In fact, he was there when I was there. Once again, another character, a real nice guy, and actually a real good talent. He really was. Cared a whole lot about maybe one of the most talented people that we ever had there as for, he had a good voice, good delivery, and, he went on. I think he left the radio business, got into computers, when they were in their infancy, and I have lost touch with Rick. I haven't seen or heard from him in probably 20 years, so I don't even know what he's doing now.
Mm-hmm. Well, I did catch up with him. He's still in computers.
Is he?
And we'll be catching up with him in about 2 weeks.
Good.
So, and another gentleman you mentioned to me, Joe Wall.
Joe, we hired from, he was also at one of the stations in Houma, and we hired him. And, yeah, he was kind of, I lost a lot of sleep over Joe because he just couldn't wait to get into trouble. He was one of those guys that just, once again, another talent, but he was the funniest human being alive, and he didn't care what kind of trouble he got into. But you couldn't stay mad at him too long. You know, he was one of those people where you went to yell at him or to scold him for something, and, you know, you just kind of had to laugh at him. He had one of those personalities where he could get away with that stuff. And he's another one that I don't know what happened to him after he left. Last I heard, he was in Oklahoma or someplace.
Now, so many things I'm sure occurred over the years. Were there any in relation to news stories? Were there any stories that y'all covered locally that seemed to stand out?
Probably while I was there, the biggest story that we had, and it was pretty big when the train derailed and the Schriever overpass was knocked down and was out of commission for several months. That was probably the biggest thing that I can remember. Now, like I told you earlier, my memory's not real good. Marie could remember them all. She was involved in for decades, probably for 3 decades. She knows, can give you every little detail of every story there is. But like I said, I was program director, and I was a DJ. I played records, you know. I mean, that was somebody else's job. So, but I can tell you she remembers it. But that was probably the big story that I can remember.
And I take it, though, you mentioned it earlier about when you first got on board and you had a hurricane in the Gulf. I take it there were probably a few nights along the way, I guess, during your tenure, maybe including Hurricane Juan, where y'all probably had to stay up a good many nights.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was one of these things where we were a daytime station, so we had to go off the air. But in the event of a natural disaster like that, we stayed on 24 hours a day until the danger had passed. So yeah, every time we had a storm that was threatening us, we stayed on, and that was we had a number of those. I'll tell you, several a year. It seemed like for a long time. You know, the great thing about KTIB is that it was a community radio station, and is, and you know, back then, and I don't know if you guys do it now, but I mean, when they had we had an all volunteer fire department, and when the alarm went off, we opened our microphone so that people that were listening to the radio could hear the alarm go off. You know. We did that sort of thing. It was truly small town community, great radio. It really was some of the best ever.
Were there along the years? Were there? I know there's something I should have asked earlier when I got you on the phone before, but were there any real interesting people you remember most that either you or someone had interviewed at the station, or characters along the way that seemed unforgettable from your years here?
Oh, yeah, there were a ton. Just a ton of people there. You know, and I know it sounds, you know, like I'm patronizing people when I say this sort of thing, but gosh, everybody that ever called the radio station was a character. You know, and I know people that will remember the swap shop and those days where people would call every day. And I mean, we had a guy, he called, William, I'm not joking, I bet he called every day for 3 or 4 years. He had 50 gallons of industrial yellow paint to sell. And I don't know, he may still have that paint. He may still have that paint to sell. I don't know. But every day I'd expect him to call, and he had it, you know.
Now, that brings up something. When y'all did swap shop, because some stations have different rules, were there certain kinds of things that people weren't allowed to sell on the air?
Well, you know, pretty much we tried to stay away from let people that own stores, you know, call and sell stuff. And you know, we were loose about it. We let people sell, you know, pretty much anything they wanted to. I don't think we had any problems that we had to call somebody down for selling something that was, you know, not legal or those sorts of things. But you know, we sold cars and we sold bikes and we sold that industrial yellow paint quite a bit. And you know, that guy must have worked for the school board. That had to be school bus paint, I'm thinking.
Mm-hmm.
But he, but yeah, no, we pretty much let everybody sell what they wanted.
Mm-hmm. Now, one thing I wanted to bring up, because we had mentioned this beforehand, one of the great shows I remember KTIB airing every Saturday was American Country Countdown.
Oh yeah, we did that. We carried Bob Kingsley for several decades.
Mm-hmm. Now, the one thing I want to let the listeners know that you could give them better insight on is that long before satellite relay became readily available, that basically, if my memory is right, that a lot of times y'all would get the show on LP and would have to air the albums on the air with the announcer's voice mixed in with the songs.
Yeah, we would get each week American Country Countdown. There were several shows like that, but each week we would get American Country Countdown. It would come on 3 vinyl discs, and we'd play it. It'd be an album, and it would have commercials in it and everything else. And actually, at the end of each show, we'd take a caller and we'd give them the countdown. We'd give them the radio show. And we did that for several years, and people kind of liked it because they got to hear their 40 favorite songs, and if you gave them those 40 songs, that was a little something extra. That was in the days before MP3s on computers and all that stuff, so there was some value to that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think those things are probably worth a little bit of money now.
Well, with the way eBay's taken off, there's no telling how much
right.
they go for now. But all the years you've done radio, and let's bring that up now. Why did you decide to leave KTIB when you did?
At the time, I had a real good opportunity here in Lafayette. My in-laws were living here. And it just it was a good opportunity. I mean, they were paying me a lot of money to come over here, and it was just a good deal for me.
Mm-hmm. So, what station are you at now?
I'm actually the general sales manager, the director of sales for Citadel Broadcasting. We actually have 8 stations that I run here. So I've gotten out of the programming end. I'm not on the air at all, as a matter of fact. I just kind of run the sales departments here.
Is it as fun as your life here in Thibodaux?
Oh, no, absolutely not. And anybody that tells you radio now is as fun as it used to be, they're, and I know I sound like an old man now, but they're fibbing you. It's just completely different now. And radio's still fun now, don't get me wrong, but it's not anything like it was before.
Well, hey, speaking of fun, there's one thing we almost forgot about, and we mentioned a lot of people that helped put the station together, but I know one thing for you being on the air when you were here, but I'm sure that made your daytime a lot more interesting with the various contests KTIB had. And I think back to turkey shoot and I guess reindeer races or fire call. A lot of them must have been pretty fun when people...
The two contests that we did year in and year out, and people just waited for were turkey shoot and fire call. Those two, when the Thibodaux Fireman's Fair came to town, and people were ready for it, it was just a huge deal. The phones would light up, and same thing with turkey shoot. They used to do that at all the radio stations in the world, but I don't know, and I've been to several of them, worked for several, but I don't know any of them that were any stations that were had a turkey shoot that was as popular as KTIB's was. And it was a real easy thing, We used to have these what they're called carts, and it was like a big 8-track tape that we would play sound effects on. And somebody would, we'd take a caller and they would shoot, and if they hit the turkey, they would win the turkey. But if you heard the sound effect of a cow or a pig, or if you hit some other animal, you just didn't win anything. And we'd give away about 30 or 40 turkeys every year for Thanksgiving. It was a pretty fun thing. It really was.
Did y'all do anything similar for Christmas?
Gosh, we probably did. I imagine in my time we may have shot a couple of reindeer or Santa Claus or something, but I don't remember any of them, to be honest with you. Mm-hmm. Those were the two contests that we did every year.
Mm-hmm. Now, so I tell you what, it sounds pretty fun, and like you said, radio may not be as fun as it used to be, but it sounds like you still got a ton of good memories about everything down here.
Oh, it's just, like I said, I will probably grow old thinking about some of the things. And I think about things every day that I'd forgotten about. The people over there, I'm telling you, there are people in Chack Bay that I still hear from. And I haven't been there in 15 years, and that's just the kind of people they are. But yeah, listen, I was in home. Like I said, we'd sign on the air in the morning, and then we'd sign off at night. And I was signing on for Roy Pugh one time. I'll never forget this. I was in Houma, and of course, I'd set my alarm clock to go off so that I could get there for 5 o'clock. And one morning I got up before my alarm clock went off, and I looked over there, and it said like it was 5:15 or whatever, so I reached and I flipped it off, and I got in the car, go to Thibodeau, and I get there, and the clock said it was 1:15, and I said, oh my goodness gracious, I guess, electricity must have gone off. So I set all the clocks to 6 o'clock, and I sign on, and I play the Star Spangled Banner and the Pledge of Allegiance, and go on the air. And at 7 o'clock, I'd go on to put on the news, the ABC News, and it wasn't on. I was getting this beep, And I said, well, what is going on? It's just a weird morning. So I go to check my time. We had that atomic clock time that we could check, and I'd gotten up 5 hours early and signed on the air 5 hours early, and it was just one of those days. I thought it was the right time, and it wasn't. I was kind of in my sleep that whole time, so I signed off, laid down on the floor, slept for a few hours, and signed back on again at 6 o'clock. But those things happen all the time, It wasn't like today where everything is automated.
All righty. Well, listen, I tell you what, we really enjoy all this time you gave us today. And is there anything else you'd like to say to all the people listening?
I'm going to tell you, when you called and told me you were doing this, it brought back some great memories. I hope everybody in the Lafourche Terrebonne area are listening. And my goodness, I hope this can bring back a few memories for them. They're great people, and I'd love for any of them to give me a call. I'm here in Lafayette, and I'm listed in the book, or they can call me at the radio station. I'd love to hear from any of them. I really would. They're great people there. I've got a huge place in my heart for them.
Jimmie Cole, another well-established family member of KTIB's broadcast history.